How people imagine that letting go must mean stepping back, hardening, withdrawing into some chilly corner of themselves, as though openness were dangerous, and the only sensible thing is to place a little frost between oneself and the world. But the frost, is just another mask of fear. It pretends to be strength, but it's really a shaking hand in a pocket, hoping no one notices. Letting go is altogether different. It isn't the art of becoming numb, it's the art of becoming transparent, letting life pass through without catching on the edges. Most people grip because they think life is a sort of slippery rope, and that if they stop holding tightly, they'll fall into some abyss. But the astonishing thing, the sort of cosmic joke, is that the abyss they fear is made entirely of their own imagining. It's a picture painted with trembling strokes, and because they stare at it long enough, they believe it's real. You've felt that, I'm sure. The way the mind insists, if I stop holding on, I won't be safe. And so the grip begins on people, on plans, on ideas of who you think you ought to be. But the grip becomes the tension, it becomes the ache. And eventually, you begin to suspect that the thing you're holding so tightly isn't pulling you forward at all, it's holding you back. Letting go isn't letting life escape you, it's letting life breathe. If you watch a tree, really watch it, you'll notice it never stiffens against the wind. A tree doesn't say, I must not bend, or I will lose my dignity. It simply sways. It moves with the invisible currents that shape it. And yet, despite all that yielding, it remains rooted, not cold, not aloof, just naturally itself. Human beings, though, often imagine that warmth depends on attachment, that if they loosen their grip, they'll stop caring. But caring is not the same as clinging. Caring is like the warmth of the sun. It radiates because it is, not because it holds. The trouble is that so many have been taught, perhaps quietly, perhaps by example, that openness invites harm. And so they build these subtle armors, little habits of distance, a certain tone in the voice, a shrug, a way of stepping back just enough that no one can lean too close. It feels safe, but it numbs the fingertips. You stop feeling the texture of the world. And yet, you can sense there's something inside you, a wish, a longing to be touched by life again, to feel the wind without flinching, to meet another pair of eyes without checking for danger. That longing is the soft center you've been trying so hard to protect. It isn't made to be armored, it's made to be seen. Letting go is not losing that soft center, it's trusting it. Imagine a river. People often believe they must swim upstream to keep control, because downstream, well, who knows what's there. But the river isn't an enemy. It's the very movement of existence itself. When you stop fighting it, you discover that it carries you with an intelligence far older than your effort. It knows where to turn, how to curve, where to slow and deepen. Now, there's a quiet misunderstanding that letting go means apathy, a kind of blankness, a shrug of the shoulders. But apathy is the refusal to feel. Letting go is feeling so completely that you don't need to hold. You don't cling to a sunset to enjoy it. You don't restrict a bird's flight to admire it. There's a love in seeing things come and go freely, a warmth that doesn't depend on possession. You see, becoming cold is simply another strategy of control. It says, if I do not care, nothing can hurt me. But that is the same fear in a quieter costume. You might become untouchable, but you also become untouched. And that, in the end, is its own kind of wound. Life moves with a rhythm, like breath. Inhale, exhale, gather, release. When you try to inhale and never exhale, you suffocate. When you try to exhale without ever receiving, you faint. Letting go is the exhale that makes room for the next breath, and warmth comes from breathing fully. There's an art to this that isn't learned by striving. It's felt in the spaces between experiences. When a conversation ends and you don't chase it. When someone leaves and you don't close the door behind them with resentment. When a moment passes and you don't demand that it return. These small surrenders create a kind of inner spaciousness, a room in which life can dance without bumping into your defenses. Think of the sky. Clouds drift across it constantly. Shapes, moods, weather. The sky doesn't cling to any of them, yet it holds them all, not coldly, but openly. Its vastness isn't aloofness, it's freedom. When you begin to sense that same open sky within yourself, you no longer fear that letting go will empty you. You realize it creates the space where warmth can flow. The heart doesn't warm by gripping, it warms by listening, by allowing, by being honest with itself. There's a peculiar thing that happens when you stop trying to manage everything. Feelings move through you more quickly. Sadness comes, and instead of sticking, it dissolves. Joy arises, sparkles for a moment, and moves on without loss. You discover that everything is fluid, and you are the space in which it moves. And gradually, a kind of gentleness appears. Not a softness of weakness, but a softness of understanding. You see that everyone is carrying their own invisible tensions, their own little knots of fear. And your letting go becomes an invitation for them to loosen as well. Warmth spreads not by force, but by example. You let go not to push life away, but to let life in. The paradox, always the paradox, is that when you loosen your grasp, you actually feel more connected. Because connection isn't made in the grip, it's made in the meeting. In the moment where you and the world touch without trying to own or control each other. And so letting go becomes a kind of dance. You move, life moves, and neither step on the other's toes. You find a rhythm that feels like truth. You feel yourself as part of something wider than your plans, softer than your fears, more alive than your strategies. If you listen closely, there is a moment, a very quiet one, where letting go feels like falling upward, a release into something that has been holding you all along. And perhaps that's the secret. You were never meant to grip life to stay afloat. You were meant to float because you are buoyant by nature. Warmth rises when fear sinks. And when the fear dissolves, even slightly, you begin to feel the natural lift of being alive. Letting go is simply remembering that. And it brings you here, to this very moment, where the breath settles of its own accord, and you begin to notice that nothing in this moment is asking you to be rigid. The room doesn't demand it, the air doesn't. Even your thoughts, when left alone, soften around the edges. It's only the habit of holding on that tightens things, like a fist long after the object has been dropped. And once you see that, even faintly, you begin to loosen for no grand reason at all. Not to achieve serenity or to impress life with your spiritual posture, but simply because it's more natural to unclench. Letting go, you discover, is not an act of will. It's the stopping of an act of will. It's the moment a bird realizes the cage door has been open for ages, and the only thing keeping it inside was the memory of bars. Fear leaves behind these ghost structures, and we keep bumping into them, bruising ourselves on something no longer there. But when you pause, when you really look, you see the empty doorway, and a kind of quiet laughter arises, not loud, not triumphant, just the soft chuckle of someone waking from a long and overly serious dream. Now, warmth comes back in a peculiar way, not as a rush, but as a thaw, a slow melting of the instinct to shield your heart. You feel it first in small encounters, a smile you return without hesitation, a moment of stillness in which you don't reach for distraction, a tenderness toward yourself when you falter. These are signs that life is seeping in again, like light through curtains. You realize that letting go isn't something you do to life. It's something you do within yourself, for yourself, and life responds accordingly. People sense it. They feel that you are not holding them in a grip of expectation or fear, and in that absence they relax. They meet you with the same ease you offer. Warmth is contagious in that way. Not forced warmth, not the performance of kindness, but the natural warmth that rises when you're not bracing. When a leaf falls from a tree, it doesn't become cold on the way down. It spins, flutters, and sometimes lands right in the palm of someone who pauses long enough to notice it. Letting go is like that fall, a release that is also a dance. And the dance is what keeps it alive, even in dissent. But you see, the mind is clever. It will say, if I let go, people may leave, things may change, I may feel pain again. And yes, all of that is true. But trying to prevent movement doesn't prevent pain. It prevents life. Pain is not the enemy. Pain is simply the sensation of growth when we've resisted it for too long. It's the stiffness in a muscle that hasn't been stretched. The ache is not punishment, it's invitation. There is a moment, if you sit with yourself long enough, where you realize that your warmth never depended on anything outside you. It was only obscured by the tension of trying to hold the world still. Imagine a pond on a windy day. The surface is disturbed, rippling with every passing gust. But the depth of the pond remains untouched. Still, clear, reflective. Letting go is sinking into that depth. Not to escape the surface, but to understand that you are not limited to it. Once you sense that inner depth, you find that you can meet the wind without becoming scattered. You can open your hand without feeling empty. You can release without feeling lost. The warmth you feared losing is actually born from that depth. It's the glow of being in accord with yourself. And this is what keeps you from becoming cold. You're no longer letting go to get away. You're letting go to be here, fully, honestly, without the constant negotiation with life. There's a lightness that comes then, a way of laughing more readily, of forgiving small things before they even settle in the mind. You move differently. You speak from a place less entangled. People notice not because you preach, but because your presence feels like a gentle clearing in the woods where someone can sit without needing to defend themselves. Letting go reveals warmth because warmth was what you were made of before fear taught you to harden. And the most beautiful thing is that nothing is lost. What is real in your life, the connections, the insights, the moments of truth, they remain, not because you hold them tightly, but because they fit naturally in the open space of your being. You become like a shoreline. The waves arrive and depart, but the shore does not vanish with each withdrawal. It simply receives, releases, and remains. And in that rhythm, you find something marvelous. That openness doesn't weaken you. It strengthens you with a quiet, unshakable resilience. A resilience that doesn't need armor, because it doesn't wage war with experience. It moves with experience. You begin to see that letting go is really a kind of listening to the current of life as it moves through each moment. Listening to the truth that arises when you are not forcing the world into shapes that suit your fears. And when you listen like that, openly, gently, the world starts to whisper back. In the rustle of leaves, in the hush of evening, in the soft way someone says your name. Everything becomes a reminder that you are part of a vast unfolding, not separate from it, not threatened by it. There comes a day, or perhaps just a moment that feels like a day, when you realize you no longer fear the feeling of release. You no longer interpret it as loss. It becomes instead a kind of inner freedom, like unclasping a tight necklace. There are moments, sometimes quiet, sometimes aching, when one looks over the shoulder of time and wonders what it was all for. You wake up one day and realize that years have passed, and somehow the grand story you thought you were writing seems to have slipped through your fingers. Perhaps you did everything you were told you should do. You worked hard, you stayed busy, you followed the path that others laid before you. Yet still, there is this haunting whisper that asks, was this it? It can be a very strange and lonely feeling, this sense that you have wasted something as sacred as your own life. Because you see, we are all taught that life is something to be used, something to be directed toward a purpose, something that must amount to something in the end. And so we chase after the idea of meaning like a man chasing his own shadow. But the more you run after it, the further it seems to recede. This idea of waste only appears when we measure life by a story we believe it should have followed. You were supposed to be somewhere by now. You were supposed to have done something. become someone, proven something? And yet here you are, standing still, looking at the world, and feeling as if everyone else is moving ahead while you are being quietly left behind. But the strange thing about that feeling is that it never quite tells the truth. Because what if what you call wasting your life is only your life refusing to be wasted on the wrong things? What if your stillness is not failure, but rest? What if the roads you didn't take were simply the ones that were never yours to walk? You see, we live in a world obsessed with progress. Everything around us is designed to convince you that you must constantly be moving towards something, producing something, improving something, achieving something. But in that endless striving, you forget how to be. You forget that the meaning of life is not found at the end of a path, but in the simple act of walking. The oak tree does not rush to grow. The clouds do not hurry across the sky to arrive at a destination. And yet, we are convinced that stillness means stagnation, that silence means absence, that not knowing means failure. The idea that you have wasted your life is built on a comparison. You look at what others have done, what they have achieved, where they are, and then you measure your own existence against their imagined success. But comparison is a trick of the mind. It turns life into a contest, when in truth it was never a race at all. You are not running toward meaning, you are meaning unfolding. Consider this. If a flower were to bloom at midnight, hidden from every eye, would it still be beautiful? Would its fragrance be any less sweet because no one saw it? The flower does not bloom to be seen. It blooms because blooming is its nature. In the same way, your life does not need to be seen, measured, or admired to be worthwhile. You exist because the universe willed it so. And that, by itself, is enough. The feeling that life has been wasted often arises when the story you told yourself about who you were supposed to become begins to fall apart. But every story must dissolve for truth to appear. There comes a moment when the masks grow heavy, when the ambitions no longer excite you, when the old dreams start to feel like clothes that no longer fit. And that moment, though it feels like despair, is actually the beginning of something miraculous. It is the unraveling of illusion. For so long you believed you were on your way to somewhere, but where exactly? You were never truly going anywhere, because you were never truly separate from the place you longed to reach. You are already there. The journey was never about arriving. It was about realizing that you had been home all along. Many people come to this realization late in life, sometimes after decades of striving. They wake up one morning, see the lines on their face, the gray in their hair, and they think, what was it all for? They look at the possessions, the status, the roles they played, and none of it feels real anymore. And that can be a terrifying moment, but it can also be the first true breath of freedom you have ever taken. Because when you no longer believe you must become someone else to be worthy, you begin to live. Let me tell you a small story. There was once a monk who spent his entire life searching for enlightenment. He meditated for years, fasted, studied sacred texts, and traveled from teacher to teacher. Yet peace always seemed to elude him. One day, exhausted and old, he gave up. He sat beneath a tree and said to himself, I have wasted my life. But as he sat there, a gentle breeze passed through the leaves, and he noticed the sound of the wind, the sunlight flickering through the branches, the simple stillness of the world. In that moment, he began to laugh, because he realized that all along he had been searching for something that had never been lost. The same is true for you. You cannot waste your life any more than you can waste the sky. You may delay awareness, but the totality of life remains untouched by your choices. Even the mistakes, even the regrets, are part of the great unfolding. Nothing is outside of it. Nothing is wasted. You see, your idea of waste depends on your idea of time. You imagine a line, a past behind you and a future ahead, and you judge where you stand along that line. But time is not a line. It is a dance. The past is not gone. It is alive in you now as memory, as experience, as the invisible current shaping this very moment. The future is not waiting. It is already being born through your thoughts, your breath, your presence. And this moment, this one right now, is eternity disguised as now. So when you say, I have wasted my life, what you are really saying is, I have not noticed that life has always been here, because it has. It never went anywhere. Regret is the mind's way of trying to rewrite a story that was never yours to control. It is an echo of resistance, a refusal to accept the perfection of imperfection. But the moment you stop arguing with your past, the moment you allow every mistake to simply be part of the fabric of what made you, a quiet peace begins to emerge. That peace is not indifference. It is understanding. Perhaps you feel you spent too long in the wrong job, or loved the wrong person, or chased dreams that dissolved into dust. But what if none of that was wrong? What if each step, each heartbreak, each detour was essential in leading you to this very awareness? Life, after all, is not a straight path. It spirals, it loops, it doubles back, it confuses you on purpose so that you may eventually see the futility of trying to control it. And once you see that, a beautiful thing happens. You stop trying to win life. You begin to live it. The great error of modern man is that he measures his worth in productivity. You are not a machine. You are a mystery. You are not meant to function efficiently. You are meant to experience deeply. You are meant to feel the full weight of being alive, the joy, the loss, the uncertainty, the beauty, the grief. Every part of it is sacred. If you could only step back and see your life not as a series of failures or missed opportunities, but as a single piece of art, a painting in progress, you would realize that even the dark strokes are necessary for the light to shine. The contrast is what gives the picture depth. Perhaps you cannot see it now, but someday you will. You will look back and see that nothing was wasted. Every wrong turn led you home. Every heartbreak opened your heart a little wider. Every delay prepared you for what could not be rushed. The truth is that life cannot be wasted, because life is not a possession. You cannot lose what you never owned. You can only forget that it was never yours to control. So, if you feel you have wasted your life, I invite you to look closer. Look at the way the light falls on your hands. Look at the breath moving through your chest. Look at the small, miraculous act of awareness that allows you to even ask this question. This moment, right here, is your life, and it is whole. When you truly see that, something within you softens. The tension of regret begins to dissolve, and in its place comes a deep, unshakable peace. Not the peace of escape, but the peace of recognition. Because the truth is, you were never off track. There is no track. There is only this infinite unfolding, and you are part of it, now and forever. That is where healing begins. That is where the illusion of waste ends. When you begin to sense that perhaps nothing was wasted, the mind doesn't easily surrender its habit of measuring. It will try to find a new way to evaluate, a quieter scale upon which to weigh the worth of your days. It might whisper, all right, perhaps I didn't waste my life, but surely I should be further along by now. You see, even when you stop running, the mind still wants a finish line. But there isn't one. The idea of a finish line is born from the illusion that life is a journey from ignorance to enlightenment, from brokenness to wholeness, from lostness to foundness. But there was never such a line to cross. You were never incomplete. You were never missing anything. What you call growth, what you call progress, is simply the unfolding recognition of what has always been true. Yet the human being as it is, craves story. It needs to feel that it is going somewhere. That need gives us hope in dark hours, but it also creates a subtle prison. For as long as you believe there is somewhere you must arrive, you cannot rest here. You are always just a little bit away from home. So much of our suffering comes not from the past itself, but from our attempts to rewrite it. We imagine the alternate lives we could have lived, the choices we should have made, the people we might have been if only the cards had fallen differently. But these imagined lives are ghosts. They shimmer just beyond the reach of what's real. And every time you compare your actual life to those ghosts, you dishonor the sacredness of what actually is. You were never meant to be the best version of yourself. You were meant to be the only version of yourself. The perfection you seek is not in some ideal self-image, it's in the depth of the one that already lives and breathes within you. The truth is that the feeling of having wasted your life is an invitation, not a condemnation. It is a quiet knocking from the soul, asking to be seen, asking you to stop chasing, to stop proving, to stop trying so hard to be something. The exhaustion that follows years of striving is not evidence of failure. It is the body and spirit calling you home. And coming home to yourself can feel strange at first, almost unsettling, because the person you built in your mind, the one who was supposed to be accomplished, admired, certain, and strong, begins to crumble. What remains is someone far simpler, softer, more real, someone who does not need to pretend. There is a tenderness in that breaking, like the moment you realize the wave has always been the ocean. The separation was only imagined. And with that realization comes a strange, liberating humility. You begin to see that even your mistakes were not really yours. They were movements of the universe through the particular form you call me. Now, imagine standing on the shore of your own life. Behind you, the waves of memory crash and dissolve. Before you, the horizon stretches endlessly. You could spend your whole life staring backward, watching the ripples of what has been, or you could simply turn and face the open sea. Both choices are available, neither is wrong. But one keeps you bound to what has passed. The other invites you into the mystery that has always been waiting. This moment right now is not the sum of your past, nor the promise of your future. It is life in its purest form, unadorned, unmeasured, and utterly free. The trouble is that we rarely allow it to be enough. We clutter the present with demands for meaning, for validation, for proof that it matters. But meaning, my friend, is not something you give to life. It is what life gives to you when you stop asking it to explain itself. Look at the simple act of breathing. You inhale, and without effort, the universe enters you. You exhale, and you give yourself back to it. That rhythm has been happening your entire life, unnoticed, uncelebrated, perfectly balanced. You do not ask each breath what purpose it serves. You simply breathe. And yet, each breath sustains the miracle of your being. That is how life works. Meaning emerges not from what you do to it, but from what you allow it to show you. When you loosen your grip on the idea that your life must justify itself, something beautiful happens. The ordinary begins to shimmer. You notice the way sunlight falls on your table, the sound of distant laughter, the quiet pulse of your own heartbeat. And you realize, perhaps for the first time, that this unremarkable, unplanned, unspectacular moment is the essence of living. The modern world, however, does not reward this awareness. It worships noise. It values ambition over stillness, productivity over presence, attention over understanding. You are constantly being pulled away from yourself, told that you should be somewhere else, doing something else, becoming someone else. But the truth is that every time you abandon the present to chase a future, you deepen the illusion of waste. You create a gap where none exists. This is why so many people grow restless, even when they appear successful, because deep down, the soul cannot be satisfied with applause. It only longs for truth. And truth, unlike success, cannot be achieved. It can only be seen. When you begin to live with this seeing, your relationship to time begins to change. You stop asking, how much time do I have left? and start realizing that you are time. You are the eternal now, unfolding as this moment, this breath, this heartbeat. Life is not moving through you. You are life moving. The past, then, is not a weight to carry. It is a teacher. The mistakes you think ruined, you were actually sculpting you. The losses you grieve were making space for something new to arise. You thought you were being broken. You were being rearranged. You see, the universe wastes nothing. Not a leaf that falls, not a tear that drops, not a single heartbeat. Everything is used, everything transformed. You are part of that alchemy. So how could you have wasted your life when life itself wastes nothing? Sometimes the path seems meaningless only because you're standing too close to it. Like a painting, its beauty can only be seen when you take a few steps back. You must allow the years to settle, to merge, to reveal their hidden symmetry. Only then do you begin to see the pattern. Only then does the chaos make sense. And as you begin to see that pattern, gratitude quietly replaces regret. You realize that the very moments you despised, the loneliness, the failure, the confusion, were the ones that softened your heart. They broke the shell of who you thought you should be so that something vast and tender could shine through. So, you see, you did not waste your life. You were preparing to live it. And this living has nothing to do with success or legacy. It is about seeing the sacred in the simple, the way water moves, the way your hands age, the way a small kindness lingers long after it's given. These things, though small, are the pulse of eternity. But you must learn to stay with the moment, to stay with yourself, to stay with life even when it offers no grand answers. Because when you stay, you begin to notice that the feeling of emptiness was never emptiness at all, it was spaciousness. It was room for you to finally arrive. Now, some will ask, but what about purpose? Don't we all need one? And yes, in a way, purpose gives us direction, but direction is not the same as destination. Purpose is not something you find, it is something you express through being. The tree does not need a purpose to grow, its growing is its purpose. The bird does not need a reason to sing, its singing is its being, and so it is with you. Perhaps your greatest purpose is not to achieve anything at all, but to embody awareness so fully that life can experience itself through you. That may not sound grand, but it is divine. If you can see that even one day of your life, one seemingly wasted, uneventful, ordinary day was actually filled with this quiet divine presence, then the idea of waste collapses. Because what you were calling wasted time was actually eternity playing dress up as delay. And if you can understand that, not just intellectually but inwardly, then a great peace will find you. Not the peace of resignation, but the peace of realization. The peace of knowing that you have never been outside of life's embrace. Everything that has ever happened, every failure, every detour, every regret was part of the unfolding of this awareness. It could not have been otherwise. When you truly see that, the ache of I have wasted my life begins to dissolve into a quiet smile, because you realize that the story you were mourning was never real to begin with. It was only a dream of who you thought you should have been. And awakening, after all, is nothing more than realizing that the dreamer was never separate from the dream. There comes a moment, often quietly, when you begin to understand that your life does not need to be different in order to be whole. It is a subtle shift, almost imperceptible at first. You stop asking, what should I be doing? And instead begin to listen. You start to feel that life, all along, has been whispering to you through everything you once ignored, through failure, through silence, through longing. It was never absent. You were simply too busy trying to edit the story to hear its voice. When this understanding dawns, it's not a flash of enlightenment, but more like the gradual clearing of fog. The trees of your existence, once obscured by regret and expectation, slowly come into view. You begin to see how perfectly imperfect it all was, how each stumble carved a kind of wisdom into your bones, how each disappointment softened your heart, and how even your confusion was guiding you toward clarity. This is the paradox of awakening. You find what you were seeking not by acquiring, but by relinquishing. The meaning you searched for begins to reveal itself when you stop demanding that life prove its worth. You realize that the search itself was never the problem. It was your assumption that meaning was missing that caused the ache. The feeling of having wasted your life was not the truth. It was the veil that covered it. And as that veil begins to fall, a new kind of stillness appears, not the stillness of emptiness, but the stillness of presence. The kind that exists between two heartbeats, in the quiet before you speak, in the way your chest rises without your asking. You notice that life doesn't need your permission to continue. It breathes you, it moves you, it carries you forward, regardless of your stories about it. You see, what most people call awakening is not the gaining of something new, but the gentle loss of what was never real. It's like waking from a long dream in which you spent years trying to find the meaning of the dream itself, only to realize that you were always safe in your bed. The dream was beautiful, tragic, complex, and rich, but it was never separate from the one who dreamt it. So too with life. You were never separate from the totality of it. Even in your loneliest, darkest hours, you were still held by the same intelligence that turns the planets and opens the flowers. You were never outside of that harmony, only asleep to it. To awaken, then, is not to rise above life, but to sink deeper into it, to see the extraordinary hiding within the ordinary, to realize that enlightenment was never a mountaintop, but the ground beneath your feet. You might look back now on all the years you thought were lost, and see that they were not lost at all. They were preparing you to see. They were the soil in which understanding could finally take root. Every regret was compost for wisdom. Every mistake was a seed of awareness waiting for the right season to bloom. And when that season arrives, you begin to move differently. Not because you found some grand new purpose, but because you are no longer fighting the rhythm of existence. Your actions become effortless, not because you've stopped caring, but because you finally trust the unfolding. You realize that your life was never something to manage, it was something to experience. The illusion of waste begins to dissolve because you no longer measure time in achievements, but in presence. You begin to see that 10 minutes of genuine awareness is worth more than 10 years of unconscious striving. When this recognition takes hold, even your past pain begins to glow with a strange light. You see that what once felt unbearable was, in fact, the breaking of the shell around your being. It was how life made space for itself within you, and you begin to thank the very moments that once made you curse your existence. You bow to the storm because you see now that it wasn't against you, it was refining you. And then something even deeper happens. You begin to laugh. Not out of mockery or defiance, but from the sheer relief of seeing how unnecessary all the struggle was. You realize that life had never required your control. It only needed your attention. You had been running through open fields with a blindfold on, searching for the way out, unaware that there were no walls. You may recall the times you prayed for clarity, for purpose, for a sign, and perhaps you now see that those prayers were answered not in words, but in silence. Not through instruction, but through revelation. Because clarity does not come from adding more answers. It comes from letting go of all the questions that were never yours to carry. There's an old saying that the truth sets you free, but first it makes you uncomfortable. And that discomfort, that deep unease of not knowing what to do with your life, was the beginning of your freedom. It stripped you of false certainty, of borrowed dreams, of identities that were never truly yours. It left you naked before life itself. And that nakedness, that vulnerability, is the doorway to peace. Because when you stand without pretense, without the armor of who you think you should be, life finally meets you as you are. And that meeting is love. You begin to see that love was never something to find or to deserve. It was the quiet awareness that remained after everything else fell away. It is the gentle hum behind all experience, the soft current that carries every joy and every sorrow. When you touch that current, even briefly, you realize that nothing has ever truly been lost. For how can anything be lost in a universe that recycles itself infinitely? How can a life be wasted when each breath, each tear, each moment of longing becomes part of the great turning? You are not a fragment of the cosmos. You are the cosmos, looking at itself through the eyes of this particular human form.
You can't ask for change and expect everything to be the same. It sounds obvious, and yet this is exactly what most of us secretly hope for. Think about that for a moment. We say we want a new life, a new beginning, a new self. But secretly, we want it delivered without disturbance. We want the comfort of the old world and the excitement of a new one, both at once. And isn't that what makes us suffer? This strange wish that things improve but nothing be touched? We ask for growth, but hope the ground never shakes. We pray for love, but dread the risk of heartbreak. We want to fly, yet still keep our feet safely on the earth. Life doesn't work like that. Change always rearranges. It doesn't slip quietly into the room while you sleep. It comes like a tide, sometimes gentle, sometimes like a storm, carrying away pieces of who you once were. And the funny thing is, while it's happening, it really feels like a blessing. It feels like loss, confusion, even betrayal. It makes you cry out and ask, why me? Why now? When you ask for change, you are asking for a kind of death, the death of who you were, of how things used to be. And only through that death can something new be born. Every wish is a disturbance. The moment you ask for something, you have already set a ripple into motion. The universe is not deaf, it hears you always. But here is the trick. It rarely answers in the way you imagine. We think asking is like placing an order at a restaurant. You say, I want love, I want success, I want peace, and you expect it to arrive neatly, served on a silver plate. But life is not a waiter. It is more like a teacher. It doesn't hand you answers. It hands you the conditions to discover them. So when you ask for strength, you don't receive strength. Instead, you face difficulties that force you to grow strong. You ask for wisdom, and life doesn't whisper secrets into your ear. It hands you problems, riddles, paradoxes, so that in solving them, wisdom takes root in you. You ask for courage, and suddenly you find yourself standing in front of fear. When you ask for love, you don't receive a flawless angel. You receive another imperfect human, so that through patience, forgiveness, and tenderness, love may grow in you. The universe always answers, but its answers are disguised, wrapped in paradox, often mistaken for curses when in truth they are invitations. This is why so often we cry out, I asked for light, and all I got was darkness. But the darkness is not punishment. It is the soil in which the light will take root. To ask, then, is dangerous, because you will always be answered, but never in the way your ego expects. And if you are not ready, you might miss the gift inside the disguise. Imagine for a moment that every wish of yours came true the instant you thought it. No waiting, no effort, no uncertainty. You imagine a house. It appears. Another house, another car, another success, all lined up like toys in a row. At first you would feel triumphant, powerful, a God in control of all things. But after the 100th repetition, the thrill would fade, and by the 1000th it would turn to ash in your mouth, because when everything comes easy, nothing means anything. The first house you build fills you with pride. The second makes you ambitious, but the thousandth, you stop caring. You might even find it more interesting to abandon them all, to sleep under the stars on some quiet mountain, simply because there is still mystery there. The sweetness of life is not in the having, but in the journey of becoming. The chase, the uncertainty, the obstacles, these are not interruptions. They are the very flavor of existence. We forget this when we cry out for ease, for safety, for guarantees. We think we want a life without trouble, but secretly we would be bored to death by it. Like watching a movie where every scene ends happily, predictable, flat, meaningless. The paradox is that challenge, even suffering, is what gives your joy its depth. Without contrast, there is no color. Without shadow, no light. So the universe, in its strange wisdom, protects you from a meaningless life by refusing to make it too easy. It withholds the instant win, not as punishment, but as mercy, because it knows without the climb, you would never taste the summit. Life, at its core, is not a problem to be solved, but a play to be experienced. And like every play, it needs contrast. You cannot know light unless you have tasted the dark. You cannot know joy without having brushed against sorrow. Success means nothing to the one who has never stumbled. Even love, the thing we prize most, shines brightest only after we've known loneliness. This is why challenges are not detours on the road of life. They are the road. They carve depth into us, like rivers carving valleys. They give shape to the landscape of our soul. Without them, we would remain flat, unshaped, undefined. But here's the secret most of us miss. The universe is playful. It is not only teaching, it is also dancing. The struggle you face is not a punishment handed down from above. It is a game in which you are both the player and the prize. Think of it like music. A song without tension, without rhythm, without high and low notes would be unbearable to listen to. It is the rise and fall, the dissonance and harmony that makes it beautiful. Life is no different. So when you ask, why must there be difficulty? The answer is, because without it, you would never feel alive. The unpredictability, the surprises, even the tears. These are the spice of existence. In the middle of all this chaos, the changes, the struggles, the storms, there is something in you that does not move, something that watches. Call it the watcher, call it awareness, call it God within. The name doesn't matter. What matters is that it has always been there, quietly observing, untouched by the drama, waiting for you to notice. When you succeed, it watches. When you fail, it watches. When you cry out in despair, why me? It is still there, unshaken. This watcher is not against you. It learns through you. Every new perspective you gain, every mistake, every triumph becomes part of its expansion. The watcher knows the road, but it does not force your steps. You are free to choose, free to wander, free to fall and rise again. And there are no wrong choices, only lessons. You might think you failed, but to the watcher, you simply learned. You might think you wasted time, but to the watcher, time itself is the lesson. The tragedy is not in choosing wrongly. The tragedy is in refusing to choose at all. By sitting still, blaming the world, blaming others, blaming yourself, because in that stagnation, the dance stops. But the moment you turn inward, the moment you listen, you discover you were never abandoned. That silent awareness was with you in every storm, waiting patiently for you to surrender, so it could guide you, and once you recognize it, even the hardest challenge softens, because you no longer fight it alone. There are, you could say, 3 levels of awareness in how we meet life's challenges. The lowest level is blame. Here, everything is someone else's fault. Your parents, your partner, society, the economy, the government, God. Life feels like a conspiracy against you. And while blame may feel comforting in the moment, it locks you in chains, because if everything is someone else's fault, then nothing is within your power to change. The second level is self-blame. This is where most people eventually land. They stop pointing fingers outward and begin pointing them inward. It must be me. I'm the problem. I'm not good enough, not strong enough, not smart enough. And while this feels more mature, it is still a prison, because guilt, just like blame, keeps you stuck, circling endlessly in self-punishment. But there is a third level, the highest. At this level, you blame no one, not the world, not yourself. You simply learn. You fall, you rise, you fall again, and each time you collect the lesson and keep moving. There is no guilt, no resentment, only growth. This is freedom. Not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because you stop wasting energy on resistance. You stop shouting at the storm, and instead learn how to sail in the wind. At this level, every experience, even the painful ones, becomes fuel for your becoming. If you have eyes to see, you begin to notice something astonishing. Nothing you ever asked for was ignored. Every prayer was heard. Every whisper was answered, just not in the way your mind expected. The confusion taught you how to see. The chaos trained you to find stillness within yourself. The heartbreak carved your heart open so that real love could enter. This is the secret we resist the most. Life does not give you the object of your desire. It gives you the transformation required to hold it. Because if you were simply handed love without depth, you would not know how to cherish it. If you were simply handed success without failure, you would not know how to sustain it. If you were simply handed peace without ever facing storms, you would not know how to trust it. What feels like unanswered prayers are in fact the most loving answers of all. Not no, not even not yet, but rather become first, grow into it, then it will be yours. And maybe this is why faith is so hard. Because it requires you to believe that the very thing that feels like your undoing is in truth your making. So, the real miracle is not that prayers are answered. The real miracle is that they are answered with more wisdom than we would ever dare ask for. Every desire you carry is really a seed. And a seed does not become a tree in an instant. It must be buried, cracked open, broken apart by the soil, before it ever reaches the light. This is the part of the journey most of us resist. We want the fruit without the breaking, the harvest without the season of waiting. But life doesn't work like that. You don't just receive your dream. You become the kind of person who can live it, breathe it, carry it. If you want success, life will train you in persistence, discipline, and failure, so that when success comes, you won't collapse under its weight. If you want peace, life will send you storms, so that when peace comes, you'll recognize it not as escape, but as strength. The greater journey is never about collecting things. It is about becoming someone who can dance with uncertainty, who can carry both joy and sorrow without breaking, who can love even when it hurts. And through it all, life will always be shaping you into the person you were meant to become. And all along, the watcher within you, the silent presence, the divine awareness, has never left your side. It was guiding, shaping, and waiting for you to see that you were never alone. So love your challenges, love your lessons, love even the things that break you, because one day you will look back and realize nothing was wasted. Everything was part of the journey, that all along what you thought was against you was secretly working for you. So be at peace, be grateful, and remember, the whole point was always to dance.
There comes a time, you know, when life begins to feel strangely unfamiliar, even when nothing around you has actually changed. You walk through the same rooms, you meet the same people, you say the same things, and yet it all feels as though you are watching it from a few feet away. It's as if you've stepped outside the costume you were wearing, but everyone else still sees you in it. And this is one of the most curious experiences a human being can have, because it feels at once like loss and liberation. You see, the funny thing about growing up is that we think it only happens to children. But in truth, growing up never stops. The body may reach its height, but the soul, if you let it, keeps expanding far beyond the forms it once knew. And the difficulty of this, of course, is that society isn't very well designed for it. Society wants you to remain recognizable. It says, stay the person we know. Don't change too quickly, or you'll make the rest of us nervous. But life doesn't listen to that kind of advice. Life moves, you see, like water flowing through the shape of a stream. And when the stream bends, the water doesn't argue, it simply flows. When you resist that movement in yourself, when you try to stay the same while something deeper is pulling you forward, you begin to feel this strange tension, this quiet ache, as though you're betraying something invisible inside you. And perhaps you felt that. You wake up one morning, and the music that used to excite you now sounds a little hollow. The ambitions you once chased begin to feel like chores. You go to the places you once loved, and the colors seem to have drained from them. You haven't become depressed. You've simply become aware. You've outgrown the language of your old life. It's rather like returning to your childhood home after many years. The house is smaller than you remember. The furniture seems oddly placed. You recognize everything, but it no longer holds you. This is what happens when you begin to awaken, when the consciousness within you starts to stretch beyond the limits of your identity. The world that once felt enormous begins to look like a set on a stage. Now look, this isn't something to be frightened of. It's quite natural. The problem arises only when you think you should still belong to that smaller world. When you start saying to yourself, I ought to still enjoy this. I ought to still believe that. I ought to still feel that old excitement. But you can't, because you are no longer the person who could. You see, we humans have this peculiar tendency to confuse familiarity with truth. If something feels familiar, we assume it must be right. And yet, everything that's true in life at some point feels unfamiliar because it's new. When you were born, even breathing was unfamiliar. When you fell in love, it was unfamiliar. Growth always feels that way. So the real spiritual challenge is not to force yourself back into comfort, but to sit quietly in this space of not knowing, this in-between place where the old world doesn't fit but the new one hasn't yet appeared. And that can be terribly uncomfortable, because you can't explain it to anyone. You can't tell your friends, I feel like the person you think I am is dissolving. They'll look at you rather strangely, but that's all right. Most of the world doesn't understand this process because most people are trying desperately not to go through it. You know, we spend so much of our lives trying to be consistent. We tell ourselves we must have a clear identity, a direction, a goal. We create these little psychological boxes and then feel very proud of keeping within them. But life, in its infinite playfulness, keeps shaking the box nudging it open, whispering, "Come out, there's more." And when you finally dare to step out, you discover that the thing you called the world was never fixed at all. It was only the portion of reality your mind could recognize at the time. The world changes as your seeing changes. That's why it feels like you've outgrown it, because the old framework of perception can no longer contain what you now sense. Let's put it another way. Imagine a fish living in a small bowl. To the fish, that bowl is the entire universe. Then one day, someone moves it into a pond. At first, the fish might panic. The boundaries it depended on are gone. The water seems endless, and the familiar edges that once defined its safety are missing. But after a while, the fish begins to explore, and it realizes the pond was there all along. It simply couldn't see beyond the glass. That is what happens when consciousness expands. The bowl breaks, and you think you've lost your world, but really, you've gained it. Now, the difficulty with this kind of growth is that it doesn't come with a manual. No one tells you how to live when the old meanings stop working. And so, for a time, you feel lost. You may even think you're going backwards, that something has gone wrong, but I assure you, it hasn't. The sense of being lost is the sign that you're moving closer to what's real. Because to find reality, you must lose your illusions first. Perhaps it would help to remember that every transformation in nature involves a kind of death. The seed must die to become a tree. The caterpillar must dissolve to become the butterfly. The night must fall before the dawn can appear. And you, too, are part of that same rhythm. The parts of you that no longer serve your growth begin to fall away, sometimes painfully, sometimes quietly, but always inevitably. Now, people often ask, how do I know if I've really outgrown something, or if I'm just restless? Well, the difference is subtle, but unmistakable. Restlessness comes from wanting something different. Growth comes from becoming something different. Restlessness wants to escape. Growth wants to understand. Restlessness says, I can't stand this anymore. Growth says, this no longer fits who I am. And you feel it not as irritation, but as a gentle certainty. You see, real growth is never an act of rejection. You don't leave the old world in anger. You leave it in peace, because you understand it. You see through it. And that understanding dissolves the need to belong to it. You no longer condemn the people who still live there. You realize that once upon a time, you did too. You can even love them more deeply, because you no longer need them to be anything other than what they are. And so, the world you've outgrown isn't an enemy, it's a teacher you've graduated from. And the strange melancholy that follows, because there is a melancholy, is not sadness, but gratitude. Gratitude that something so familiar could have nourished you long enough to bring you here. Now, this is where many people become confused, because they think enlightenment or awakening means always being happy, always feeling above the old life. But enlightenment, you see, is simply clarity. It's not an escape from being human. It's a deep acceptance of it. You still feel everything joy, sorrow, boredom, confusion, but you no longer resist it. You no longer mistake your passing moods for who you are. And as this realization deepens, the very world that once felt too small begins to look beautiful again. Not because it's changed, but because your seeing has. You can still walk through the same streets, talk to the same people, and yet it all feels luminous, transparent. You see the dance rather than the struggle. You see people not as obstacles, but as expressions of the same life moving through you. But you cannot reach this stage by force. You can't make yourself awaken. You can only notice when the old shell has cracked and stop pretending it hasn't. The rest happens by itself. The river flows because it must. And you too are being carried. When you let go of the effort to belong to your old story, you begin to sense the vastness that's been here all along. It's as if a fog lifts and you realize that the world is not outside you, it is within you, reflected through your perception. That's why outgrowing the world feels so disorienting, because it's really your perception that's shifting, not the world itself. So perhaps you might stop asking, what's wrong with everything? And start asking, what is awakening in me? For when that question arises, something wonderful begins to happen. The confusion turns into curiosity. The loneliness turns into space. The silence, which once felt empty, becomes peaceful. And slowly, you begin to notice that there's a quiet intelligence at work beneath it all, that life itself knows how to unfold without your constant control. The tree doesn't struggle to grow, it simply grows. The ocean doesn't try to move, it moves. The stars don't plan their shining, they shine. And you, my friend, are no different. So don't be afraid of outgrowing the world around you. Don't try to shrink back into old patterns just to keep others comfortable, for that would be like a bird breaking its own wings to fit back into the nest. Let the winds of change lift you. Let the seasons of your being turn, because one day, when you look back, you'll see that the world you thought you left behind was not abandoned at all. It was transformed by your seeing. The world expands to the size of the soul that perceives it. And that is the beginning of true freedom. Now you see, once you've begun to sense that you've outgrown the world around you, something very strange happens. You begin to notice that you can't go back, not because anyone has locked the door, but because the person who would have fit there no longer exists. And this can be terribly unnerving at first, because most of us are brought up to believe that progress means more comfort, more belonging, more certainty. But the genuine progress of consciousness, the real awakening, moves in the opposite direction. It leads you into uncertainty, into the open, into a place where belonging has nothing to do with fitting in. When you awaken, you realize that belonging is not something you get from the world. It's something you remember within yourself. It's the recognition that you were never separate to begin with. The world was not something happening to you. It was something happening as you. But that's a difficult truth to digest, because we've spent our entire lives thinking of ourselves as little fragments, little egos floating around inside our skins, separate from everything else. And so when that boundary starts to dissolve, we panic. We say, if I'm not this person, if I'm not this role, who am I? But that question, you see, is precisely the doorway, because the truth can only enter when the old answers fail. The mind wants a definition, but life is not a definition. It's a process, a dance, an ongoing miracle of transformation. Now look, you can't pin that down. The moment you try to define yourself, you've already limited the mystery that you are. It's like trying to catch the wind in your hands. You can't do it. You can only feel it move through you, and that movement is you. This is why, when people begin to awaken, they often feel like they've lost themselves. They haven't. They've only lost the fiction of themselves, the story that was never truly theirs to begin with, the identity built from ideas, expectations, and fears. And once that illusion starts to crumble, what remains is something astonishingly simple: awareness itself. You see, awareness has no shape, no boundaries, no history. It is the space in which everything appears and disappears. Thoughts, feelings, people, places, they come and go. But the awareness in which they arise is untouched. It doesn't age. It doesn't change. It is the same awareness you had as a child, though its content has shifted countless times. So what's really happening when you outgrow the world is not that you're becoming better or more spiritual. Those are just words. What's really happening is that you're remembering that you were never the world to begin with. You were always the consciousness through which the world appeared. And that realization changes everything. It doesn't make you superior, it makes you humble. Because you see that every person, every bird, every leaf on every tree, is an expression of the same consciousness, the same awareness looking through different eyes, the same life breathing through different forms. At that point, you no longer feel the need to prove anything. You stop arguing with reality. You stop trying to make life fit your idea of how it should be, because you realize it already is. The great cosmic joke is that all your efforts to control life were happening inside the very flow that was carrying you perfectly where you needed to go. It's like trying to row upstream in a river that's already taking you home. The moment you stop struggling, you discover that you've been moving effortlessly all along. Now, of course, the mind doesn't like this. The mind says, well, if I stop striving, won't I become lazy? Won't I lose my edge? But that's the trick of the ego, you see. The ego equates surrender with defeat. But surrender is not giving up, it's waking up. It's the recognition that you were never separate from the movement to begin with. Think of breathing. You don't have to remind yourself to do it. You can, if you want, take control for a while, but eventually the body breathes by itself. Life lives itself through you in the same way. The more you trust it, the more effortlessly it flows. And perhaps this is what growing beyond the world truly means. It doesn't mean renouncing the world. It doesn't mean escaping from it. It means seeing it as play, as rhythm, as a kind of divine game. When you see that, the heaviness drops away. You stop trying to make sense of everything, because you realize that sense itself is part of the dance. The philosopher's mistake has always been to think that life is a problem to be solved. But life isn't a problem, it's a mystery to be experienced. When you outgrow the world, you stop treating it like a puzzle and start moving with it like a melody. You see, the world around you is always changing, always dying and being reborn in every instant. The past, you remember, no longer exists. The future, you imagine, will never arrive the way you think. There is only this living moment, endlessly renewing itself. And you, if you're awake, are not separate from that renewal. You are it. And that, perhaps, is what people fear most, that they are not observers of life, but participants in it. Because to truly participate means to let go of control. It means to trust the unknown. It means to love without conditions, to laugh without reason, to cry without shame. But the more deeply you surrender, the more natural it becomes. You start to notice that the very energy that moves the stars is the same energy that moves your breath, that the silence between your thoughts is the same silence between the waves of the ocean. You realize that what you've been calling you and what you've been calling the world were never two different things. And suddenly, the question, have I outgrown the world, disappears, because there's no longer a you and a world to compare. There's only the dance. When this becomes clear, life begins to feel effortless again, but in a new way. Not the careless ease of ignorance, but the deep ease of understanding. You can walk through chaos and remain still inside. You can lose everything and feel as though nothing essential has been lost, because you finally see that what you are cannot be taken away. It's like realizing you are the screen on which the movie of life is projected. The scenes change, the characters appear and disappear, but the screen remains untouched. Once you know yourself as the screen, you can enjoy the movie fully, even the tragedies, because you know they're not ultimate. You can laugh and cry at once. That's freedom. Not the freedom of getting what you want, but the freedom of no longer needing to. The freedom of realizing that you already are what you were seeking. So, when you find yourself feeling distant from the world, don't rush to fix it. Sit quietly in that distance. Feel it, because that distance is not separation, it's space. The space in which awareness recognizes itself. And in that stillness, you begin to sense something extraordinary, that all your growing, all your seeking, all your outgrowing were never really about reaching somewhere else. They were about remembering what you've always been. You can almost hear it in the silence, a kind of laughter beneath the surface of things. The laughter of the universe, realizing it's been playing hide and seek with itself. You pretending to be you. Me pretending to be me. And then suddenly, the game is up. We remember. And when you remember, you don't need to outgrow anything anymore, because you see that growth and decay, birth and death, coming and going, are all movements of the same ocean. You stop identifying with the wave and realize you are the water. This realization doesn't make the world vanish. On the contrary, it makes it shine. You can look at an ordinary leaf and it will bring tears to your eyes because you see eternity in it. You can sit in traffic and smile because even there you sense the divine pulse. Nothing is ordinary anymore. Everything is alive. And this, I suppose, is what it truly means to awaken, to return to the simplicity that was always here. You discover that the world you thought you had outgrown was never outside you. It was a reflection of your own awakening consciousness. The moment you stop fighting it, it transforms before your eyes. So, don't be discouraged if you feel you've drifted away from what used to be familiar. You're not lost, you're being remade. You're not breaking down, you're breaking open. And one day, perhaps when you least expect it, you'll look around and see that everything fits again. Not because it's gone back to how it was, but because you've expanded enough to hold it all. That's when you'll know you've come home. Not to a place, but to a seeing, a stillness that was here all along, quietly waiting for you to stop searching. And from that stillness, you'll realize something beautiful. You never really outgrew the world. You simply grew into the realization that you are it. There comes a time, you see, when the strength you've always carried begins to tremble beneath its own weight. You wake up one morning, and though nothing terrible has happened, you feel as though you've been carrying the world for too long. People still say you're strong, that you handle things well, that you always seem composed, but inside there's a small voice whispering, I can't keep doing this. Not because you've failed, but because somewhere along the way, strength became a costume. We are taught from a very young age that to survive, we must be strong, to stand firm, to endure, to push through. But the problem is, we're rarely told what kind of strength we're supposed to have. So, we begin to mistake hardness for resilience, silence for composure, and endurance for peace. We think being strong means not breaking, but in reality, life was never about being unbreakable. It was about learning how to flow, to bend, to soften, and to let go. You see, the ocean is strong not because it resists, but because it yields. It gives way to every current, yet nothing can destroy it. And so it is with us. The strength you've been chasing, the strength you've been praised for, is the kind that hides pain under control. But true strength, the kind that comes from being alive, doesn't need to control anything. It is the quiet acceptance of what already is. When you are tired of being strong, it is not a sign of weakness. It is the beginning of wisdom. Because the kind of strength that exhausts you was never truly yours, it was borrowed from fear. The fear of falling apart, the fear of being seen, the fear of disappointing others. You've held everything together for so long that the idea of letting go feels like dying. But perhaps that's the point. A kind of death is necessary before you can be alive without pretending. Most people live as if life is a test of endurance. They measure their worth by how much they can withstand. But what happens when endurance becomes emptiness? When you've been so composed, so self-contained, that you've forgotten what it feels like to be held by something larger than yourself? The truth is, no one can carry life alone. The river doesn't push itself forward. The tree doesn't lift itself toward the sun. Strength, as nature shows, is always in cooperation with the invisible. So perhaps what you're feeling now, the exhaustion, the quiet ache, the sense that your inner walls are crumbling, is not failure at all. It's simply the moment life has chosen to remind you that strength was never the goal. Presence was. You've been so good at holding things together that you've forgotten what it feels like to fall apart safely. And that is why you're tired. Not because you're broken, but because you've been living as though the whole universe depends on your composure. Imagine, just for a moment, if you didn't have to hold it all. Imagine if the world didn't collapse when you stopped pretending to be fine. What if the strength you need now is not the kind that carries, but the kind that releases? To cry when you need to admit that you're lost, to rest without guilt. What if the most powerful thing you could do was nothing at all? To simply breathe, to be, to exist as you are, not as the person you've been performing, but as the being beneath all the performance. When you stop trying to be strong, something extraordinary happens. You begin to see that everything you were holding together never needed your strength to exist. Life keeps moving. The world continues to breathe, and you, too, begin to breathe differently, slower, deeper, without resistance. It's a strange kind of freedom to realize that your collapse is not a tragedy, but a transformation. It's the caterpillar dissolving in the cocoon. It doesn't fight to hold its form. It allows the melting, and what emerges is something it could never have imagined while it was clinging to its old identity. So, if you are tired of being strong, let that tiredness be holy. Let it be your teacher. Because the end of forced strength is the beginning of true surrender, and surrender is the birthplace of real power. You might think surrender means giving up, but that's only because you've been taught that control is safety. You've lived as though your grip on things is what keeps life from falling apart. Yet, if you watch closely, everything you love has always been beyond your control. The sunrise, the laughter of a friend, the timing of grace, none of it was your doing. And yet it arrived perfectly. Strength isn't about holding the tide. It's about learning to trust its rhythm. You see, we mistake life for something we must manage, when in truth, it's something we are invited to experience. When you are tired of being strong, it means you're ready to stop living from the surface. You're ready to let the current carry you back into your own depth. But there's something tender that happens in this stage. You begin to grieve. You grieve the person who always showed up, who never complained, who carried everything without asking for help. You grieve the mask of strength that protected you for so long, even though it was never meant to last forever. It kept you safe once, but now it's only keeping you distant. In that grief, something sacred unfolds. Compassion. You begin to see yourself not as the hero of your suffering, but as the child of the universe, fragile, imperfect, and completely loved. The universe does not demand that you be strong. It only asks that you be real. There's a peace that comes from realizing you no longer have to prove your resilience. You no longer have to appear put together to be worthy of rest. The truth is, you are not admired for your strength. You are loved for your being. And perhaps that's why you've grown so weary, because strength was never meant to be an identity. It was meant to be a moment. You were never supposed to stay strong forever. You were meant to soften again and again until you remembered how to feel. When you stop striving to be strong, your heart becomes available again. You begin to feel life's subtleties, the way silence hums, the way small moments expand, the way simple things like sunlight through a window can make you cry without reason. You rediscover what it means to be alive, not because you've regained your old strength, but because you found something deeper, the strength to be open. The world doesn't need your armor, it needs your aliveness. It doesn't need your perfect posture, it needs your presence. The real power of a human being lies not in endurance, but in receptivity, the courage to let the world touch you. So if you find yourself exhausted, unable to keep being strong, don't fight it. You're not falling behind. You're finally aligning. You're remembering that existence itself has always been strong enough to carry you. There is a hidden grace in reaching the end of your strength, because that's where you discover the strength of life itself. And life, you see, never needed you to perform. It only ever wanted you to be. And so, when you've stopped pretending to be strong, when the armor finally slips and you can't keep your composure any longer, something extraordinary begins to happen. It isn't loud and it isn't dramatic. It's quiet, almost invisible, like the sound of rain at dawn or the gentle exhale after a long-held breath. For the first time in perhaps years, you are no longer fighting life. You are letting it hold you. You begin to realize that the world was never asking you to carry it. All this time, you've been trying to shoulder what was always meant to flow through you. Emotions, moments, people, they were never possessions. They were passing clouds. And the moment you stop trying to hold them in place, the sky clears. It's strange, isn't it? You spend years believing that if you let go, everything will fall apart. But when you finally do, you discover that what falls apart was never real to begin with. The image of who you were supposed to be, the perfection you were meant to maintain, the reputation you worked so hard to uphold, they dissolve quietly. And beneath all that, you find something soft and alive, yourself, unguarded and free. Now, I don't mean that everything becomes easy. The waves of life will still come. The uncertainties will still whisper, but you meet them differently. You no longer brace for them, you breathe with them. You see, life has always been a rhythm, a dance between strength and surrender. You can't hold your breath through the entire song and still call it dancing. Real strength is a kind of participation. It's being able to stand in the storm without needing the storm to end. It's allowing yourself to tremble and still say, this too is me. In the great flow of things, what endures is not the rigid but the supple. The bamboo bends and does not break. The river cuts through stone, not through force, but through patience. And in that same way, when you let go of the need to appear unshaken, you discover a resilience that cannot be destroyed. When you are tired of being strong, it's life calling you home, home to a way of being that is effortless, a way that doesn't strive to manage or maintain, but simply to move in harmony with what is. This is not resignation, it is awakening. The understanding that the universe was never separate from you. The wind that breaks the branch is the same wind that carries the leaf. There is a subtle peace that arises when you stop trying to be the one holding everything together. You realize that even your so-called failures were never really yours. They were the universe learning through you, expressing through your form for a while, then moving on. And when you see this clearly, the guilt fades. You no longer feel like you've disappointed life, because you begin to see you are life. You cannot fall out of it. It is in those moments, sitting quietly in your own company, where strength and softness finally become one. You start to notice things again. The taste of morning coffee, the rhythm of your breathing, the way sunlight spills through the curtains, small, ordinary miracles that had been drowned out by your endless effort to stay strong. You realize how much beauty you missed while you were busy being unbreakable. So now you can finally rest. You can let life hold you instead of trying to hold it all together. You can admit that you don't always know what you're doing, that you're not always fine, and that maybe you never had to be. Because in truth, strength was never about never falling. It was about learning to land. You see, the tree that loses its leaves each winter does not mourn their loss. It trusts the cycle. It knows that what falls away will one day return, transformed. And you, too, are part of that same rhythm. The self that breaks is not dying, it is shedding. The weariness you feel is not the end, but the beginning of renewal. There's something deeply freeing about realizing that you don't have to earn peace. You don't have to prove your worth through resilience. Peace comes when you no longer resist what is. It comes when you stop reaching for tomorrow and simply rest in the completeness of now. When you stop trying to be strong, you become real. You begin to love without condition, to feel without shame, to exist without needing to explain. The softness you once feared becomes your strength. It's the kind of power that doesn't dominate, but understands, that doesn't force, but allows. It's easy to think that the world only respects the loud and the unyielding, but all things that endure, mountains, oceans, silence, do so through stillness. That stillness is your true strength. It isn't born from control, but from connection. It's the strength of water, of breath, of being at peace with not knowing. So, when you feel yourself faltering, when you can no longer keep up the act of composure, don't resist it. Sit down, breathe, and let yourself be carried. You don't need to fix what was never broken. You only need to remember that you are allowed to be soft. Because what holds this universe together is not force, but love, not effort, but flow. And the moment you stop fighting that truth, life rushes back in, not to demand more of you, but to remind you that you were never alone in the first place. Strength was never the goal, you see. The goal was wholeness. And wholeness includes everything: the tears, the laughter, the fatigue, the surrender. So if you are tired of being strong, you are right where you need to be. The storm is not against you, it's clearing you. And when the rain finally stops, you'll find yourself standing in a world that feels strangely new, not because it changed, but because you did. You stopped pretending to be the one carrying the world and allowed the world to carry you. And that, my friend, is real strength, the kind that needs no witness, no applause, no armor, the kind that simply is.
There's a great cosmic joke being played on anyone who seriously pursues the spiritual life. And the joke is this: what you thought you were looking for is not what you actually find. You thought you were looking for happiness, for peace, for some kind of permanent vacation from the troubles of being human. But what you actually stumble into is reality. Raw, unfiltered, utterly honest reality. And reality, as it turns out, is not always pleasant. It's true, yes. It's real, certainly. But pleasant? That's another matter entirely. The strange thing is, once you've tasted this reality, once you've seen behind the curtain, you wouldn't trade it for all the comfortable illusions in the world, even though it hurts. You see, spiritual awakening is not what we've been sold in the marketplace of popular ideas. It's not a perpetual state of bliss, not a permanent vacation from the difficulties of existence. It's actually quite the opposite. It's as if you've been given a pair of glasses that allow you to see what was always there, but that everyone else has agreed not to notice. And once you put those glasses on, you cannot simply take them off when the view becomes uncomfortable. This is the great cosmic joke of awakening. You've become like someone who has developed perfect pitch in a world where everyone else is tone deaf. The discord that was always there now rings in your ears with perfect clarity. Let me share with you 7 pains that accompany this awakening. Not to discourage you, mind you, but to let you know that if you're experiencing these things, you're not going mad. You're not broken. You're simply awake in a world that is still largely dreaming. The first pain is the agony of seeing through the games. You begin to notice that almost everything people do, almost everything society celebrates, is theater. The businessman in his suit, the professor with his degrees, the mother with her perfect family. They are all playing roles, and you see it. You see the mask, the costume, the script they're following. This wouldn't be painful except for one thing. They don't see it themselves. Imagine watching a movie where all the actors have forgotten their acting. They've become so absorbed in their characters that they think the drama on screen is reality itself. And you're sitting there, seeing the cameras, the lighting, the director calling the seots. You want to tell them, look, you're playing a part. This isn't who you really are. But they cannot hear you. They're too busy defending their role, protecting their character, making sure their performance is convincing. This creates a peculiar kind of loneliness. You're surrounded by people,
but you cannot quite connect with them in the old way anymore. The conversations that once engaged you now feel hollow. The concern for its once seemed important now appear trivial, not because you've become superior, mind you, but because you've seen behind the curtain, and once you've seen, you cannot unsee. The second pain is the collapse of your old identity. Before awakening, you knew who you were. You had your story, your biography, your sense of self. I am this kind of person. I come from that kind of background. I have these qualities, these flaws, these aspirations. It was a comfortable prison, this identity. It gave you a sense of stability, of knowing your place in the world. But awakening dissolves all of this. You begin to realize that this you've been defending all these years, this character you've been playing, is just another role. It's a collection of memories, habits, preferences, but it's not a solid thing. It's more like a pattern in water, a whirlpool that appears to have form but is actually just the river doing something for a moment. This realization can be terrifying. If I'm not this personality, if I'm not this story, then what am I? The ground beneath your feet disappears. You lose the handrails you've been gripping. Everything that gave you a sense of being somebody dissolves, and you're left in a kind of groundless void. This is what the mystics call the dark night of the soul, and it's as painful as it sounds. The third pain is watching everyone around you suffer unnecessarily, and you cannot fix it for them. You see your friends worrying about things that don't matter, chasing things that won't fulfill them, defending positions that only create more pain. You see them trapped in their own minds, imprisoned by their own thoughts, and your heart breaks for them. The painful part is not their suffering itself. Suffering is part of life, part of the dance. The painful part is seeing that it's unnecessary suffering. Like watching someone beat their head against a wall, convinced that if they just hit it hard enough, the wall will give them what they want. You want to say, stop, just stop. The wall isn't your enemy, you're creating your own pain. But they cannot hear this. They're too busy hitting the wall. And so you watch. You watch people destroy relationships because they cannot let go of being right. You watch them exhaust themselves chasing success that will never satisfy them. You watch them build walls around their hearts to protect themselves from the very love they desperately need. And you feel helpless because you know that until they're ready to wake up, nothing you say will reach them. The fourth pain is the burden of responsibility. Once you see clearly, once you understand how the game works, you can no longer play unconsciously. Every action you take, every word you speak, you're aware of its effects. You see the ripples spreading out from everything you do. This awareness is both a gift and a weight. Before awakening, you could excuse your behavior. I was angry. I didn't mean it. I wasn't thinking. But now you see that you're always choosing. Even your automatic reactions are choices that you've made so many times they've become habitual. You see that you're creating your experience moment by moment, and this means you can no longer blame anyone else for your suffering. This is liberation, yes, but it's also terribly demanding. You cannot coast anymore. You cannot sleepwalk through your life. Every moment requires presence, attention, choice. It's exhausting in a way that people who are still asleep cannot understand. They think awakening means you've figured everything out, that you're now floating above the troubles of ordinary existence. But actually, you're more present to those troubles than ever before. You just relate to them differently. The fifth pain is the death of your dreams. Not all your dreams, mind you, but the dreams that were built on illusion. The dream of becoming somebody special, of finally arriving at a place where you'll be complete, of achieving something that will make you worthy. These dreams, which have driven you for so long, begin to crumble. You see that the self that wants to become enlightened is the very obstacle to enlightenment. The one who wants to be special is the one who feels ordinary. The seeker is creating the sense of something missing. It's like a dog chasing its own tail. The chase itself creates the distance. This is painful because these dreams gave your life direction. They were your North Star, your reason for getting up in the morning. And now they're revealed as fantasies, games you were playing with yourself. What do you do when the very structure of your motivation collapses? When the question, what's it all for, no longer has an answer that satisfies you? The sixth pain is the collapse of certainty. Before awakening, you might have been certain about many things. This is right, that is wrong. This is true, that is false. Life is this way, not that way. These certainties gave you solid ground to stand on. They made you feel safe, confident, oriented. But awakening reveals that reality is far more fluid, far more mysterious than your concepts about it. The more you see, the less you can honestly say you know. The great mystics and sages always speak with a kind of humility, a recognition that reality is ultimately beyond all our categories and labels. This is not false modesty, it's honest acknowledgement of the vastness of what is. This collapse of certainty can make you feel unmoored. In conversations, you find yourself hesitating, qualifying, saying it seems to me or in my experience, rather than making bold declarations. People may think you've become wishy-washy, that you've lost your conviction, but actually you've simply become more honest about the limits of what anyone can truly know. The seventh pain, and perhaps the deepest, is the recognition of your own participation in suffering. Not just your own suffering, but all suffering. You begin to see that there is no out there separate from in here. The violence in the world is not separate from the violence in your own heart. The greed that destroys forests is connected to your own grasping. The hatred between groups is reflected in your own resistance to what is. This is not about guilt or self-flagellation. It's about seeing the truth of interconnection. You're not a separate self encountering a world. You're the world knowing itself from this particular perspective. And this means that every act of ignorance, every moment of unconsciousness, every choice for fear over love, you see it all as your responsibility. This doesn't mean you're personally to blame for everything. That would be ego again, trying to be important even in its guilt. It means you recognize that the solution begins with you, that the healing of the world starts with the healing of your own heart. And this is a tremendous weight to carry, because you cannot fix it all. You cannot single-handedly awaken the world. You can only do your part, moment by moment, and trust that it matters. Now, having shared these pains with you, I want to be very clear about something. These pains are not signs that you've made a mistake, that you should have stayed asleep. They're not evidence that spiritual awakening is a terrible idea, quite the opposite. These pains are growing pains. They're the discomfort of a butterfly breaking out of its cocoon, of a seed cracking open to become a tree. You see, the alternative to these pains is the pain of staying asleep. And let me tell you, that pain is far worse, even if it's less conscious. The pain of living a life that doesn't align with truth, of playing roles that suffocate your spirit, of dying without ever having truly lived. This is a pain that most people carry so constantly, they don't even recognize it as pain anymore. It's just the background hum of their existence. The pains of awakening, on the other hand, are the pains of becoming real. They're the natural consequence of choosing truth over comfort, awareness over distraction, presence over escape. And yes, they hurt. But they hurt in the way that exercise hurts muscles, in the way that sunlight hurts eyes that have been in darkness. It's the pain of life returning to areas that had gone numb. What I find most interesting about these pains is that they don't go away, but your relationship to them changes. At first, they feel like afflictions, like something wrong is happening. But gradually, if you stay with them, they reveal themselves as teachers. Each pain carries within it a profound lesson about the nature of reality, the nature of self, the nature of this strange and wonderful mystery we call existence. The pain of seeing through the games teaches you compassion. You realize that everyone is doing their best with the level of awareness they have. Without a fixed self to defend, you can be fluid, responsive, alive to each moment. The pain of watching others suffer teaches you patience and humility. You cannot save anyone who doesn't want to be saved. The pain of responsibility teaches you integrity. Every action matters, every choice shapes reality. The pain of dreams dying teaches you to live in the present rather than some imagined future. The pain of uncertainty teaches you to be comfortable with mystery, to live the questions rather than demanding answers. And the pain of recognizing your participation in all suffering teaches you that the personal and universal are not separate, that your inner work is the most important work you can do. There's a beautiful paradox here. The more sensitive you become to these pains, the more resilient you also become. It's not that you develop a thick skin or learn to shut down your feelings. It's that you develop the capacity to hold pain without being destroyed by it, to feel deeply without being overwhelmed, to stay open even when it hurts. This is what the spiritually awake learn. Not how to avoid pain, but how to dance with it. How to let it move through you without claiming you. How to use it as fuel for growth rather than as an excuse to contract. Pain becomes a kind of music, not always pleasant, but always part of the song. And here's what nobody tells you about spiritual awakening. Eventually, these pains begin to feel almost sweet. Not because you're a masochist, but because you recognize them as the price of being fully alive. You wouldn't trade your awareness for the comfortable inconsciousness you once had. The pains are worth it because they come packaged with something else. A sense of being real, of being authentic, of being in direct contact with life rather than living through layers of protection and pretense. You begin to see that these pains are actually signs of aliveness. Only dead things feel nothing. Only those who are truly living feel the full range of human experience, including its difficulties. And there's a strange joy that comes with this recognition. Yes, it hurts to be awake, but my God, it's better than being asleep. The spiritually awake walk a curious path. They're more vulnerable and more resilient at the same time. They feel more deeply and are less disturbed by their feelings. They see the illusions and still participate in the dance. They recognize the game and still play with full engagement. This is the art of living awake. To be in the world but not of it. To feel everything but cling to nothing. To care deeply but hold lightly. So if you're experiencing these pains, welcome. Welcome to the club of those who have chosen to wake up. It's not an easy club to be part of, but it's an honest one. We don't pretend life is something it's not. We don't sugarcoat reality. We see it as it is, and we love it anyway. We feel the pain of existence, and we embrace it as part of the mystery. Remember, you cannot go back to sleep on purpose. Once awakening begins, it continues whether you like it or not. But you can resist it, and that resistance creates even more suffering. Or you can surrender to it, let it take you where it wants to go, let it teach you what it wants to teach. The pains will be there either way, but in surrender, they become pathways rather than obstacles. And here's the final secret I'll share with you. On the other side of these pains, or rather in the heart of them, there is something that cannot be touched by pain. There is an awareness that witnesses all experience, but is not damaged by any experience. There is a peace that exists not because everything is peaceful, but because it's not dependent on circumstances at all. This is what the spiritually awake eventually discover, not an escape from pain, but a dimension of being that is prior to pain. Not the absence of suffering, but the presence of something that cannot suffer even while suffering is happening. This is the ultimate paradox. The pains are real, and yet they're happening to no one. They're experienced fully, and yet they're not a problem. This might sound like philosophical nonsense to you right now, especially if you're in the middle of one of these pains. That's fine. You'll understand it when you understand it. For now, just know that what you're experiencing is natural, that it's part of the path, that countless others have walked this way before you. The spiritually awake are not superhuman. They're simply awake. And being awake means feeling everything, seeing everything, being present to the full catastrophe of human existence. It's painful.